Welcome into the vault. It is Monday, June 26th. As always, I'm Bobby Trossett alongside my co-host and partner, Sarah Ellison. And yeah, we get it. It's the dead of off season, right? So there's no morning vault per se, traditional format today, but that doesn't mean we don't still have something to get into, Sarah. And we're coming up on July 4th week, of course, which is traditionally a dark week for Ravens content, really for NFL content at large. We're still committed to producing and putting forth content that week that'll just be essentially, it's going to be recorded content. We're going to have interview style episodes with Jeff Zrebiec of The Athletic, the popular Jeff Zrebiec on Ravens Twitter, of course, who's always just as tapped in as it gets. And we're even going to have a conversation with Nick Moore, Ravens long snapper, just to name a couple that are coming up July 4th week. But you've had a busy weekend, Sarah. We've both been running around like crazy since summer began. And what's funny about it is that you would think with how busy you've been hosting, you've been having, school coming down to the wire and baseball and you name it. Yet the busyness has you stumbling upon a topic for today. So you got to enlighten us.
Yeah. So, I get this a lot. So I had a situation where we had people from my husband's work over, and I live in Ohio. For those that don't already know, I live in Ohio. So out here, there's it feels like it's super split between Bengals fans and Browns fans. And then you even have more Steelers fans than you would have Ravens fans here. So I'm always like the enemy. Okay, right? I'm the AFC North enemy. The first question, if we get into sports and all that kind of stuff, is people always ask me about Lamar Jackson. Okay. And so when we were going through what seemed like a never ending contract negotiation experience, people would always ask about that. And now that he's been signed, the new question is the same one I got literally just yesterday. So this was Saturday, had a lot of people over at the house from my husband's work. And the question is, so are you happy that the Ravens signed Lamar Jackson? And I always begin with a selfish perspective, which, may not be the best, but I'm like, yes, I'm glad it's over, because that there was just a cloud over the Ravens organization. And really with this podcast, it was like the only thing you could really talk about. If you even dared talk about anything else, it's like, well, why aren't you worried about Lamar? Why don't you get your quarterback under a contract or all that kind of stuff? So I'm like, yeah, I'm happy because A, I'm glad that cloud is over. But B, I like Lamar. I like Lamar a lot. I like Lamar as a football player. I like him as somebody who I think can carry a team. And I like Lamar as somebody who I think is only going to get better. I like Lamar off the field. I like Lamar in the community. I like the hope that Lamar gives to the city of Baltimore. I like the guy that he is. Now, he's not perfect because nobody's perfect. And who knows? Tomorrow he could make a mistake that would hit a bunch of headlines. But like in the past, when Lamar makes headlines for not positive stuff, it's like, oh, he like played football on a beach and hopped over a jet ski, right? Or like, he did get upset after that one game. So he put out a tweet that he later deleted and whatnot. But like Lamar never really gets into like big trouble. That's not.
He was speeding his rookie year.
Yeah. And stuff that you would definitely say, okay, let's not speed anymore for sure. But my point is he's somebody that you can be proud of, that Baltimore can be proud of. So, I answered that question, and the guy who I was talking to, he was more of a Browns fan than Bengals, but out here in Ohio, it's kind of nice that you have two professional sports teams. You're really not being terrible if you like root for either one. And if one is having an up year, that's like good for you, So, so obviously they people are loving the Bengals out here. They love Joe Burrow. They love what's going on with the Bengals. But this guy I was talking to was more of a Browns fan. And so I return the question and I say, well, what about you? How do you feel about the Browns signing Deshaun Watson? And I've asked this, Bobby, of many people out here because we always get into these sports conversations. Now it's still kind of anecdotal. It's not like I'm doing a poll where I've literally asked thousands of people, but I've had this conversation a lot. I've lived out here for, several years now. And not once, never once do I hear any sort of like excitement or pride in Browns fans when I asked them about Deshaun Watson. And I get it, right? And some of them are even like, no, I'm going to cheer for the Bengals now because of Deshaun Watson and his history. And I don't want to bring this up to like, just I hate kicking people when they're down. I know he's gotten a lot. I honestly don't follow him enough to know what his attitude is. If he's like, you probably know better than me, actually, Bobby. It sounds like he's still going through the court system and all that kind of stuff and whatever. I guess I'm saying I'm not bringing this up to debate Deshaun Watson because I'm not. Like, what he's going to court for is just yikes, right? But when every time, at least since Lamar has been signed, when I ask people this question and nobody's like, oh, love Deshaun. And it's not even like they'll say that everybody's embarrassed from his off the field actions, but they also can't even say, yeah, he's definitely worth the money. Now, people can debate that in Baltimore. Is Lamar worth the money? And you can debate that. But with Deshaun, it's just like, no, why did you give a fully guaranteed contract? And he hasn't been playing well. So nobody out here that I've asked has said that. So it reminded me, Bobby, of a soundbite from general manager Eric DeCosta at the presser when they were announcing officially that Lamar had been signed. And I remember it sticking out to me then, and I wanted to get back to it, but then there was so much other news, we never got back around to it. So this experience that I had yet again this weekend, I thought was a good chance for us to play this quote and see if everybody else thought what I thought from after listening to it.
Yeah. So again, this is a small snippet that I edited down from an answer. Essentially, just remember he's talking about just how much patience was required throughout a multi-year process to ultimately get Lamar extended. And so when you listen to this, he doesn't specifically say Deshaun's name, but I'm with you, and I was not necessarily when I heard it live that day, but afterwards. Let's see if everybody else thinks the same as well.
We just kept trying to persevere, and there were some dark days. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you and say every day was great. It's been a long stretch, but we know Lamar. We know the kind of person he is, and he's a phenomenal football player. But you don't make a phenomenal football player the highest paid player in the league. You make a phenomenal football player who's also a phenomenal person the highest paid player in the league. And so we had a lot of conviction that this was the right thing to do. It made a lot of sense. It just took a lot of patience. We just kept trying to persevere, and there were some dark days.
All right, so interesting, Bobby, because you had mentioned that you didn't think that you didn't think during the moment about Deshaun Watson. I did. I definitely, the moment he said it, I thought Deshaun Watson. And the reason why is because in terms of fully guaranteed money, which is what most players, which is what agents and players care about, it's the fully guaranteed money, which is reportedly, why, it took so long to sign Lamar. Look, Deshaun Watson is by far the highest paid player in NFL history in terms of fully guaranteed money, a percentage of it. I don't know what the fully guaranteed money was on Patrick Mahomes' $1 billion year, but it wasn't 100%. And this one was with Deshaun Watson. So to me, I thought he was referring to Deshaun Watson. Now, to be very clear, that's just what the quote made me think. That does not mean that for sure is what was in Eric DeCosta's mind. So I want to make that clear. I don't want to create drama with like Cleveland fans. I don't want to create drama for Eric DeCosta. He can speak for himself. But that quote to me made me feel like he was talking about, it felt like he was comparing Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson. And again, that was my interpretation. We have to ask him if that's what he meant, if we even care to go back. So, but yeah, when you're going to make a quarterback the highest player in the league, you want to make sure that you're solid from all perspectives. And I can tell you, when the Ravens are doing draft work, because it is a lot of resources, not as much as the resources that have been given to Lamar and Deshaun Watson and other high caliber quarterbacks. And so, yeah, you might be putting a first round pick into somebody, but even that's not as valuable as what, top 10 quarterbacks get in this league. And so I guarantee you, they're not just watching the tape They're saying, is this somebody that we can make the face of our franchise? And I guess my whole point in bringing all this up is I feel lucky to cover a quarterback and to cover an organization that the fans are not embarrassed to get behind. You know what I mean? And so it's like, I'm not embarrassed at all to get behind Lamar Jackson. I remember, especially when he, like that 2019 season, there's so many things that I'd take to my son. I'd be like, check this out. Lamar Jackson gets so much hate, but he wears a t-shirt that says nobody cares, just work harder. And so my son wants to get that t-shirt. You know, how many kids in Baltimore look up to Lamar and look up to how you see videos of him meeting that one where he meets that kid who, I can't remember if he was a cancer patient or had something else, but like the way that Lamar approached him and hugged him and rubbed his back and was like, I got you. And, you know, all this kind of stuff. It's just like, now again, this could always change. Even I, Bobby, you, Lamar, anybody could do something tomorrow that could be embarrassing. So I'm not saying that Lamar's perfect. Nobody is, but all he's done is show us that he's a great guy that the Ravens can get behind. And then when you just add in the football stuff on top of it, to me, the only real criticism that you could give about the contract that the Ravens gave is almost this PTSD that you had with Joe Flacco, that you give him the richest contract ever in history, but then you find out, okay, well, he needs pieces. He can't carry a team. I've already seen that Lamar can carry a team. So in that sense, I'm not worried about it. So it's nerve-wracking to pay anybody that much money because it's hard to build a roster outside of that. But outside of just that fear of how do you build a roster around somebody that you're paying so much money, and everybody that has a quarterback has to deal with that. Outside of that, it's just somebody that you're like, love Lamar. And I think that Ravens fans and the Ravens organization and even the media that have to cover him every day, it's nice to get behind a figure like Lamar Jackson.
I'll take us back to last summer when all these civil suits and, Deshaun Watson was all over the news and it's all you heard about. And I remember thinking to myself, just a few months into full-time content creation at the time, I was like, wow, if this had been the team that I was doing a daily show for, both on YouTube and in a podcast setting, I think I would have moral, what's the right word? My moral compass would have been tested, because we have an obligation to obviously create and analyze and build around the Baltimore Ravens. And obviously we know that the quarterback position is the epicenter of a football organization. And I can imagine, and having even some tweets are starting to pop up into my head from Cleveland media, especially women, I would imagine that it's been a really difficult last year or so for those people out there in Cleveland. And I would feel the exact same way. From a moral standpoint, Lamar has given us every reason to believe that he is a loving father. He is a supportive family member. He's somebody who loves his South Florida community, gives back to his South Florida community, someone who loves the game of football, somebody who is obviously gifted in every sense from a talent standpoint, and someone that is beloved by his teammates. That's what we believe. I guess Bernard Pollard maybe he was never his teammate. I guess he could be an exception. I think he still likes Lamar, Bernard, but there was that whole thing last summer, whatever.
Yeah, I remember that.
Before we launched too on Twitter. That was a wild night, by the way, when Bernard Pollard and Lamar Jackson were going back and forth. That was insane. I kind of wish we were in existence then, because that would have been a fun night content-wise. But you get what I'm saying. I've never had any moral issues. And granted, I wasn't covering the team during the Ray Rice days, Sarah. I know you were. I'm sure you can comment on that. But for that to never even be a question is probably something that we take for granted, because, man, in Cleveland, I'm sure there's a contingent of people, not just within the media, not just within the content creation world, but within the fan base, the diehards that keep the organization essentially going, right? The fans are the pulse of a sports town, of an organization. And I would imagine that the moral compasses have been tested for the last year or so, and it's never going away, regardless of what happens in court or what's already happened in court. This is going to follow him for the rest of his career, period.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm definitely somebody that believes in redemption. I don't like to keep people, in a box, and so, redemption requires, change, of course. And so, like I said, I even though I live in Ohio, I really don't follow Deshaun Watson too much, and so, this was, this was more just like that quote came out to me. You don't make a phenomenal football player the highest paid player in the league. You make a phenomenal football player who is also a phenomenal person, the highest paid person in the league. And I think that was just such a great statement about Lamar. Maybe he didn't mean anything about, Deshaun Watson. Maybe he didn't, but I do agree with this statement. Like, Lamar, you can pay him because you believe on what he's going to do on the football field. And you also believe that he's a phenomenal person, that you can make the face of the franchise. And I just think that we are extremely lucky to be able to have a guy like that in Baltimore.
The Vault is sponsored by Oakley. Express your style and build a look that's made for you. And I know for me, I've been rocking the Prism Black polarized lenses this summer, and I'm loving them so far. Oakley's changing the game, and it's time to discover a whole new world of possibilities. Do you run? Do you golf? Maybe you train, or perhaps you just want to look like Lamar Action Jackson. If any of the above is true, you got to get yourself a pair of Oakleys today. Suited for everyday eyewear with frames and lenses allowing for an extension of self. Really, it's an expression of your personality. There's more than meets the eye. And here on The Vault, we're all about look good, feel good, perform good. And that's why Oakley is the perfect partner for us. And hey, since it's officially summer, you may want to upgrade your sunglasses game right now. So go visit Oakley.com to find yourself a pair today. Oakley offers Prism Lens technology, which is a proprietary technology to Oakley and available for everyday settings as well. If you're interested in learning more, head on over to Oakley.com and do your own research. And while you're there, get yourself a pair of everyday glasses that'll be sure to change your look for the better. When you wear Oakley, there really is more than meets the eye, but don't just trust Sarah and I. Try for yourself. I've worn a lot of sunglasses brands in my life, and I can confidently say that Oakley's not only the best looking, but the best quality out there. So head on over to Oakley.com for more information today. On to the next topic here, because the Ravens could potentially make history this fall, Sarah. And I don't know if it's going to happen from a depth chart standpoint, because it's going to really ride on the fact that five former first-round picks at the wide receiver position, if they're all on the team this year, the 53-man roster, then the Ravens can make some history. This is what the Ravens can do. They can become the first team in league history to have 5 first-round selections at wide receiver catch a pass in regular season play. Now, here you go. Here's your crew. A lot of these guys we already know about, right? The Rashad Batemans of the world, the Nelson Aguilars, the Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham Jr. But the fifth, and perhaps something that's maybe flown under the radar a little bit this offseason, is Laquan Treadwell, who was recently signed, and he is a former first-round pick as well. Look, if I'm a betting man, I think he's on the outside looking in at the end of the 53-man roster. I think if you're going to take 6, I don't know what Laquan's special teams expertise is or experience is.
Yeah.
I think Tylan Wallace is seen as somebody who can be valuable in that category. And we obviously know that John Harbaugh has a special place in his heart for special teams, pun intended. But if for whatever reason, you never know what happens injuries wise, you never know roster wise, construction wise. But if Laquan finds a way onto this team, Sarah, they can make some history in that category.
Well, and okay, so the current record is the 2005 Detroit Lions. So they're the only team to have 4 different first-round wide receivers catch a pass in a game. So here's the thing. I hope that the Ravens do not make history. And here's why. I feel like for Laquan Treadwell to get a catch during the season, I think injuries are going to happen. maybe he'll ball out and I could be wrong, but I am one of the people that I don't know that he's going to make the 53-man roster. But obviously there are different practice squad rules, so maybe he'd like to stay, and maybe be on a practice squad, and then maybe if there's injuries, he gets brought up, that kind of a thing. But I definitely think that Bateman, OBJ, Aguilar, Zay Flowers, there's your 4. I definitely think all of them are catching at least one pass, if not more. Each of them, I bet, will catch more than one pass. But yeah, for Treadwell to do it, I think it's going to be injuries, because I think the Ravens will be sticking with Devin Duvernay and maybe some of these younger guys. But like, whether or not they make history, I think it's just another, it's just like another reminder that the Ravens did go all out. I remember at the end of season press conference, John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta saying, we are going to remake the wide receiver room. And like, everybody's freaking out because I don't feel like they've ever said it that clearly before. And like the year before, they said they were going to put all this time into the offensive line, and they did. They really, hunkered down 2 off seasons ago and put an off-season line together that was, a solid offensive line. And I feel like they still have that, as long as these veterans don't suddenly trail off in Zeitler and Morgan Moses. And so the Ravens went to work, and they got another first-round draft pick in Zay Flowers. OBJ they signed. They go ahead and get Aguilar. And at the time, that wasn't fun because we thought that, is this their big change, So it's a big change in the wide receiver room. And I don't care if 5 guys or 4 guys all make catches. I just hope that the top 4 guys make a ton of catches and make life easier for Lamar Jackson.
One conversation for another day, probably more closer towards training camp, is I'll be interested to follow along with who's getting first team reps as a return specialist come camp, because we know that, before Devin Duvernay went down with a foot injury, I mean, was he having an all-pro season like he had prior in the return specialist category? No, but more than serviceable. And gosh, I remember what he did. Must have been a couple years ago at this point. I think it was the Kansas City game, right? He took that thing to the house on the right-hand side and went just flying up the sideline. So clearly, if he's getting back fully healthy from that foot injury, you'd think that he'd be the shoo-in. But we saw throughout OTAs that the rook, Zay Flowers, was getting some reps. So I'd be interested to see if there's any kind of positional battle there between those two, and whether or not they even give a chance, for the rookie a chance right out of the gate. You have to think that Duve earns that, and it's his position to lose. But we've covered it throughout, learning Zay's game and background and ability and explosiveness, that he is going to be an option for them, I would have to think.
Well, let me do this, Bobby. Let me get your reaction to this. This is just off the cuff. Didn't prepare you for this, but since we're bringing this up because it's the ESPN article, and within it, I'm just noticing that they have projected fantasy numbers for each of our guys, and I want to get your reaction to this. So they start with OBJ, and they're going with 52 catches, 676 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Wow.
Okay. Now, but to give you a full picture, you want to hear what they give the other receivers too. Okay. Now that's probably not a season that OBJ wants. I'm sure he wants over 1,000 yards. It's probably less than what Ravens fans want, but I could live with it if the rest of the projections are also true. So then they got Zay Flowers up next. They're giving him 49 receptions, so just 3 less than OBJ, for 625 yards, basically on the same ballpark, and then 5 touchdowns. So very similar projections for OBJ and Zay Flowers. So you got 2 players. It's about, 600 yards. Then you get to Rashad Bateman. Very similar projections again. 46 receptions, 605 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Then Nelson Aguilar, they go way down. So it's 11 receptions, 152 yards. And then Laquan Treadwell, there's not even a projection. But I can live with that. If you've got 3 receivers all around 50 receptions, all around 600, it's 1,800 total. And then their touchdowns is 4 plus 5, 9. and 3 is 12. And then you still haven't factored in Mark Andrews and maybe Isaiah Likely. And if Kadri Ishmael's on the show, then, Charlie Kohler's, blowing up. And so how would you feel about those? Basically 600 apiece for these guys and 3 to 5 touchdowns for each.
I think it's hilarious how, with all due respect to Mike Clay, like his projected fantasy numbers, what algorithm, what equation is being like, how are we getting here?
Yeah.
To me, this is so funny. And it's a super balanced attack, obviously, right? I think that's a little bit, that's a sunshine and rainbows approach to looking at what 2023 might be for this team. I think it's more realistic to expect one of these guys to sort of emerge from the pack, chemistry wise with Lamar, who becomes that guy. If he's able to stay healthy, I would be willing to bet that that's Odell. He's an alpha male. He's on a prove it deal. Yes, he's trying to, we don't know where once it comes to actual suiting up and, game speed and regular season speed, which he hasn't, been in a football game since 2 Super Bowls ago. There's going to be some questions that he has to answer. But assuming that, everybody's told us, right? Whether it's coaches, whether it's the coordinator, whether it's Ian Rappaport, everybody that's as plugged in as it gets has said that they're expecting him to be what he once was. So if that ends up being the case, then I think he emerges from the pack. And I just don't know if it's realistic to think that Mike's numbers are so incredibly balanced. We get it. Like Todd's going to come in and revamp things, right? But that's absurd how balanced that is, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I still need to I'm sure at some point we'll have our own predictions at some point, but it will be, I think it kind of just brings us into, I think his projections are like, we don't know what any of these guys are going to be. You know what I mean? So it's maybe like a safe place to not too high, not too low, urging people what to buy, what not to buy.
Sure.
We don't know what OBJ is going to be. We don't know what a rookie and Zay Flowers is going to be. We don't know if Rashad Bateman, we still don't know what he's going to be. Whether he stays on the field, he's still we've seen flashes of him for sure when he was on the field. So I think it's just I don't know what these guys are going to be. So I'm just going to give him these middle tier kind of numbers and give it to all 3. So,
all right, Mike, we'll have a little bit of sympathy for you.
Yeah, but I do agree. As long as OBJ is healthy, I think he's going to emerge.
Yeah.
I just think that Lamar's going to have so much trust in him that it would be like a Mark Andrews kind of treatment.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think those 2 are going to be the top yardage guys, top pass catchers, top everything statistically in 2023. Those 2 right there. And remember, Odell and Lamar are scheduled to get together either in South Florida or wherever between now and camp. So that's only going to help, obviously, coming off mini camp. Speaking of statistical categories, Warren Sharp is just a guru. And this is his time of year because, it's dead. It just allows him to I feel like he sits in his lab and just crunches and crunches. And so one that you brought to my attention was the best teams back in 2022 at avoiding third down. Kansas City is 1, and all the way down to 32 dead last was the Jets. By the way, at 30 was the Chargers, and they made the playoffs. So it's interesting what this tells you. Some teams are best teams at avoiding third down. So just think about that. Kansas City's 1, Jets 32. The Ravens fall pretty much smack dab in the middle at 17. What was your immediate reaction?
That felt right. That I didn't feel like, I didn't feel like the Ravens were avoiding third down much at all. But that has made me curious. And I just looked it up while you were talking. Is I wanted to see who was the most successful on third down. That's where I felt like the Ravens got in trouble. Is third and fourth down. How many times? Actually, Ravens weren't terrible on third down in 2022. If this is correct, it has the Ravens at 12. But I just felt like fourth down. I just felt like there were QB sneaks that weren't working, or maybe it's just red zone. Maybe that's what I'm reliving. But I got to look these numbers up. Maybe it was red zone. With red zone, the Ravens were terrible. It was okay. So but this is going to be exciting stuff to see what Todd Monken can do. Can you can you avoid third downs? If you don't, or can you get them in third and shorts? And then when you're in third down, can you convert? And can you do it in a variety of ways? But then most of all, can you turn around the red zone? Because the Ravens' yardage actually wasn't terrible last year, which is why yardage is such a deceiving stat. So many people put so much stock into it. It's like, who cares? Let's look at who's the most efficient and let's see who scores points. And one thing I hear Todd Monken saying he has said it almost every time he's up at the podium. He's like, my job is to score points. That's my job. And if I can't do my job, I'm getting out of town. And so to score points, you got to do it in the red zone. You got to do it in the red zone. And I can't wait to see if he can turn that around.
Yeah, I love how blunt he is.
Yeah.
You know, he's just so all business. But yeah, I'm not surprised by this category either.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about if they are going to end up in sticky, long distance third down situations this year, they're going to have the weapons, and hopefully they will have, the balance and the variety and the creativity to cash in and have some good, solid third down efficiency.
Mhm.
A couple of those guys that we mentioned, OBJ and Mark Andrews. I think I mentioned this within the last couple of weeks or so. I see both of those guys and really Odell just being an extension of what Mark has already been over the last 5 years. And that is just an outlet, a crutch on 3rd and 7. When you need 7, now you don't just have Mark. Hopefully you can rely on Odell to win that one-on-one matchup, create just enough of separation and move the chains.
Yeah.
So even if they do end up stuck, in third down, and they aren't able to avoid it this year, I'm not too worried. All right. So before we close, Sarah, a couple quick hits, if you will, even though, again, we're not doing a scripted format here on the Vault in this episode. But Trenton Simpson, Ravens rookie linebacker, did his honorary duty, I guess, as one of the top picks for Baltimore this year. The Orioles invited him out to handle first game, ceremonial first pitch duties over the weekend. And boy, let me just tell you, the Orioles are moving right now. I always like to tell you this, give you an update, like they are moving, and they just called up a big time prospect that everybody's super excited about. He's been absolutely raking in the farm system. His name is Jordan Westberg. He's somebody that's going to be up, I believe, tomorrow. We're taping this on Sunday or whenever the next Orioles game is. So there's your little tidbit there. The Orioles are cooking. They're in the playoffs right now. We're coming up on the halfway point, so there's a lot of excitement. But
Love it.
Trenton Simpson has garnered some excitement coming off of, OTAs and minicamp just because of his sheer size alone. There was this photo that the Ravens productions account put up, and Ravens Twitter put it up, and it was the linebacker group.
Right.
And the dude is built. He's just like he's sculpted, He
is so sculpted. Yeah, I know exactly what photo you're talking about because, it had up the whole group of linebackers, but then Ravens Twitter quickly zoomed in on just Trenton Simpson. And I've also watched, I remember watching his, I think it was his pro day workout. If this guy plays the way he looks, okay, the Ravens have a beast on their hands, but a lot of times, it doesn't necessarily translate. It's not like, the most perfect bodies are like actually the most perfect athletes. So, but holy moly. I mean, he's just is built that it's like, I do not want to mess with this guy. So, so I think from that he's garnered some buzz, but it's so hard to know. And in these OTAs and everything else, there's no hitting. And so until those pads come on, I cannot wait to see what the analysis on him in training camp when the pads come on.
Oh, yeah. I hope he just gives, Mike McDonald and the Ravens coaching staff no other option than to try and figure out how they're going to get him involved. Kind of like Kyle Hamilton when they had the embarrassment of riches in the secondary before Chuck Clark left. Like how can they utilize PQ, Roquan, and Trenton, at least for a season? We don't know if PQ is going to be here after this coming season, but anyway.
Hey, real quick.
Finish things up with,
How did the first pitch go for Trenton?
You know what's funny? I didn't even see video of it.
I
Let me see
haven't
if
seen it yet. I haven't seen it floating around. I just saw pictures of him out there. So
when you talk about Marlon, I'll look it up real quick. What the heck did Marlon do? Is this guy's off season about as unique as it gets?
I oh my gosh. I love Marlon Humphrey. I love that he doesn't take himself too seriously. I just don't feel like you find too many professional athletes or anybody that's in like the spotlight. Um, like for example, so in our last vault, we did a lead of of him not knowing who's on the Madden covers, and he was our guy. He was so confident. Oh, I know, it's Jamal and Lamar. So anyway, after we did that show, I put the clip up on Twitter. And Marlon, again, not taking himself too seriously. It's not like he's trying to hide from it, nothing like that. He quote retweets it and, makes a joke that he's like, clearly this was like a trick question. I love that. Yeah, that's one reason why I like him. The second reason why I love him is because he has a hunger for life, just life in general, in the sense of like, he is all out with football. I mean, he came to the football school, for goodness sakes, not just the OTAs. He was at the football school. But when he's not doing football, I love that he's just hungry to like experience life. Going on to the trip to Japan with the other teammates, with Roquan and these other guys, and he's always trying like new things. Anyway, that's all the preamble to this quick hit, which is just that my guy he's scuba diving what looks like in his backyard, because he bought all that land, and he has like this big pond / lake, somewhere in between there. And he posted on Instagram a video of himself scuba diving. He's got on big scuba gear, he's got the big tank on his back, he's got on the big goggles, and he went scuba diving in his backyard. And I'm just like, I don't know why, like he just reminds me of when I was like 10, 11, and 12 and just exploring my neighborhood and all that kind of stuff. And he just doesn't stop. He just wants to go out and have fun and experience things in life. And I love it.
Well, it's funny. As you know, I live in Fells Point, downtown Baltimore, and Marlon lives in Harbor East, which is just, gosh, I mean, it's not even a mile away. It's like literally blocks away.
Yeah. And
every once in a while, I'll see this dude just ripping a scooter past me when I'm walking the dog. I'm like, what are you doing? He's just, he's very playful. He's very, fun loving and all those things. And yeah, which is funny, right? Because when he turns it on and flips that switch and gets into football, I mean, this is one of the best cornerbacks. So that's what's just funny about it. He's a dog on the football field, but yet he's talking to Steve Bisciotti and then telling the media about his like new girlfriend.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'm most interested in. If we want to really get into this, I would love to know when she's going to start to surface. Maybe she's been very adamant, Marlon, you do not put me on your social media until we're, hitting certain checkpoints here.
Oh, that would be me for sure. That would be me for sure.
Oh, yeah, it would be.
Yeah, you already know.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But
oh, no.
Trenton's first pitch, by the way. I got some video of Trenton's first pitch. Just a little wee bit high and outside, left-hand side. So, had a little bit of heat on it, but did not hit the strike zone, unfortunately, for Trenton. But we are looking forward to seeing.
But it didn't hit the dirt or anything.
No.
Okay, so respectable.
It wasn't a Victor Wembanyama. I don't even know how to pronounce his first name, but he was the first pick in the NBA lottery, in the NBA draft the other night. And I guess the Yankees may have had him out for a first pitch just within the last week or so leading up to the draft. And his hand size, Sarah, is like literally like, it's inhumane. This dude is 7'5". He's 7'5". And like, you can't hold the baseball basically, because it's like a ping pong ball basically.
Right. So.
Yeah. But
all right, well,
close,
fun impromptu podcast episode tonight. I like it.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, I think we talked about this a little bit, just kind of full transparency. I think it'll be good to fit a few of these in, over the next month or so as we get ready for camp, just because, a lot of family time coming up for us. We are going to go dark. We'll have content the week of the 4th in interview fashion, Q&A type things. We do have our mailbag episode, which will be coming up the week of the 4th as well. So if you're a patron, or if you just want to hop in the Q&A mailbag episode and you want to give it, throw a submission in there, hit us up as always via email at BaltimoreRavensVault@gmail.com. We want to also shout out 2 of our returning patrons who are supporting the channel, and also just in podcast form as well through Patreon this month. That's James Wiley and D Black. We want to hear from everyone. Like you said, BaltimoreRavensVault@gmail.com is the email that you can reach us. Anything else, partner, before we jump?
That's it.
All right. So for Sarah Ellison, I'm Bobby Trossett signing off from a spontaneous podcast episode here on The Vault. As always, we would appreciate your subscription over in the YouTube space. We're coming up on 8,000. So thanks for your support there as always. And we will talk to you soon here inside The Vault. Later.